Sarah has been the subject of a couple stories I've written about poverty, and one really revealing one especially revealing one. So this next question is pertinent.
Okay.
You and I have talked a bit about it, but so how do we as journalists really report fairly on people, and how do we reach out to people and do it, especially people in difficult situations, and do it in a thoughtful way? I like to think I do, but it's not easy all the time to just come up to someone and say, hey, sure, you're a horrible, the worst moments of your life ever with me, so I can put it in front of a bunch of people and think I can write cool about it, right?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think you do it well. You do it particularly well. So thank you for that.
I'm not sure what I did, but okay.
Well, I've been the subject of more than just news articles, so I've been on TV news. I don't like that, and I won't get into that too much, but so how do you do it? So be authentic, and why you're doing it, right? So I think news articles are just by definition voyeuristic because you're telling our story, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if you're doing both the good and the bad, right? So like what I really dislike when it's just like the horror story, which is what happens a lot of times on the TV stations, and that's a really short thing, so you can't really tell a lot in like a 20-second TV thing. There was one that was really great, actually, that was on TV 18, one of the first ones that I did, and I really appreciated that one. But then there was others where I did a speaking engagement with the More Than Meth campaign kicked off. I didn't realize what that was going to turn into, and had I known, I would have never done that. But where the only thing, so I did a really great presentation, purposely only focusing on my recovery that was happening since then, purposely not telling much about my addiction. And all I said was meth brought me down a lot of scary roads, and then I focused on like what my life has been like since then. And the only thing the TV station reported on the clip that they put on the TV was meth brought me down a lot of really scary roads. And I was like, what? So yeah.
How do we do it better?
So you do it better by, like I said, telling both sides, right? So what I really wanted them to say was the positives, like how Joan and I had wrapped their arms around me and welcomed me into the community. I shared that piece. How although I has had some struggles, my life had gotten better. Housing was huge for me. I wanted them to really focus on that so the community could see that there's solutions. And it's not about scaring everybody out of not doing meth, because guess what? We've been doing just say no and scare tactics since the 80s, and people are using drugs, guys. It's not working, and it's not going to stop anybody. But what will stop them is by welcoming them back into the community and seeing hope. And knowing that there's a bunch of different measurements of success, and it's not just one measurement. And that is what I want. That's the stories that I want to portray. And of course, I don't have control over that. But what you've done right, I think, and what I want to see more of is like working with the people and like saying, hey, this is what I'm going to print, or this is the outline, maybe not details of what it's going to be, but this is the outline, and are you okay with this, right? And of course the editor has the control ultimately, but I think that, because then I feel respected. And I feel like it's not just a voyeuristic thing, but it's a relationship.
Well, and I usually never do that, to be real honest. And I would, I know I didn't read any stuff to you, but I was paraphrasing, here are a few things that I would include in it. Because it was, that first one was some really harsh, sensitive stuff. I didn't write it soft, right?
Right.
So I could be criticized for revealing too much. And sometimes I am criticized for that, to be honest.
Right.
But I wanted it to have impact, and that was the real story. I didn't want it to be a predictable, shallow piece.
Right.
But I needed to navigate some of that with you just as a human being. I felt like, okay, you told me this, but you were crying in the middle of that, so are you really okay with that, right?
Yeah, but then,
so that's why I did that.
Then you followed up with where I am now, right? And you could have just left it at like what a horrible mom I was, and like all these places that I was, and that's not the whole story. And if that's all you do, thinking that you're going to somehow stop other people from doing meth, you're wrong. And that's not a good news story. That's voyeuristic, and it's like what the parents who think they're gonna stop their teenagers from doing it by scaring them, you know what I mean? Like, that's, to me, that's the bad story, that's the ineffective story, and that's the story that I will never talk to you again if you did that, to be honest. I mean,
So really telling us a complete story is what you're saying.
Yes,
Trying to
tell
tell
us
us
a
as
complete
complete as we
story.
can in our
Yes, and
space
the reason
time
why,
constraints.
and I'll just be honest, the reason why I choose to share my story in the public is because I want people to have hope. And I will bare my soul to you as a journalist, because I want people to have hope.
Dominique, you kind of answered this already a little bit, but can personal stories overcome stereotypes? Is that an effective way to do it? And how responsible are journalists for reporting those stereotypes and for perpetuating them? Like how, we need to be really conscious of that, don't we?
Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword, and I think Sarah said it, when you have to show the two faces of the coin. I mean, you can tell a story and perpetuate stereotypes through the story. For example, for showing only the horror side of life and not showing, like the humanity in that person as well. So I think the problem that we have very often is that, and we need to face it, we haven't talked about that yet, is that journalists often face time pressures and deadlines, and and have to actually deliver a story on a very short amount of time. Where to deliver the stereotypical view of someone is much easier. You actually build on some things that you have in your mind and you deliver that. That's what people expect. We're done. We move into the rest of the story, the rest of the day. Most investigative journalism, well done, takes time and effort and establish that relationship with the sources and then mutual trust and respect. And unfortunately, very often I would say the fault resides in the newsroom itself, where the journalists are not given the time and space to do that well. So it's a tricky situation when it's not always because they don't want to do it, but because of the reality of the life, it's not always easy to do it well. And in that case, stereotypes will be perpetuated.
Those constraints that she mentioned are very true and becoming tighter all the time. It's a constant battle that I know I fight, and I'm sure you guys fight, and all journalists fight. Joan and Joy, what are, you guys mentioned it just briefly earlier, but how did you guys overcome reporting stereotypes? Like, were you conscious of that as you did the story? It sounds like yes. And did you just basically write what you found, and that was if you did that in an honest way, that was a way to avoid the stereotypes or get beyond them, maybe?
Okay, so we thought of, so for example, I'll use one of the stories as an example. A lot of people, there's a lot of women, more and more women in America are raising children alone with a very low income. 50% of kids born in Tennessee are to single moms right now. It becomes an enormous economic issue. But yet some will say, and remember, if you look at the birthing patterns, who's having kids? The women that are struggling, not the educated women. They're delaying birth and they're delaying marriage. So the population is growing among the most vulnerable population, and that's why so many are concerned that America is moving into more of like a caste system, where we can't cross classes. So we were thinking about how people view those women. One thing is they say, well, why don't they stop having kids? Why don't they just make better choices? Why don't they just take their birth control on time? But what we were able to show, and what we knew from the research, is that trauma impacts the brain. And this is something that was just coming out at the same time of the Harvard study, which was showing how communities and cultures impact children and their futures. So we were learning that actually when trauma happens to you in childhood with poverty, and there's so many different ways it impacts you, it really impacts your executive functions and your ability to stay organized and on time. And birth control pills have to be taken for women in their nose every day. Okay, so they're trying to push on these women more of the IUDs and the shots and all that. They're really trying to manage having children. This is a judgment that we put on them. But yet, if you're a woman struggling with poverty, and your father's left you, and your mom is crumbling under the weight of poverty and treating her in a cruel way because she can't handle the trauma of her own childhood. And she's maybe turning to drugs for just a little moment of comfort, you know? That kid is going to be impacted. And so we just wanted to show that. And so we found a woman who just showed that journey so perfectly and all the complexity of it, and also showed her coming out of it and giving hope and being this fighter and this advocate for change. So that was a way that we kind of handled that stereotype. Is that right?
Yeah, it's good. So just basically like reporting real stuff, but also like going beyond the obvious, it sounds like.
So we would have a narrative character, like that would drive the entire story. It was all about them, and we wanted the reader to connect to them and understand them. But that person represented, like she was saying, this bigger thing. So whenever she hit this moment where she forgot to take the birth control, her freshman year of college, that's when we broke out in the next paragraph and we said, here's all the data. So,
Sarah, how are we as media doing related to stereotypes and perpetuating them or not?
I'm sorry, can you ask the question again?
Yeah, how are we as, you kind of talked to us a little to this a moment ago, how are we doing as journalists related to stereotypes? Are we perpetuating them or not?
I think as a whole, I think journalism is getting better. You know, I think you're describing it perfectly. That's why I was getting really emotional. I think it's getting better. You know, but having grown up in the 80s and 90s, you just described my life. I made some notes when you guys were talking earlier about the data and the people. More people need to tell their story, you know, but stigma stops them. Because it's dangerous to tell their story, because that stigma, the stereotypes, makes people judge them. If you can hide, you might be safe. You might be able to exist just a little bit longer without falling apart. The details of people's lives may be different, like the little details, but the themes are the same. People will say to me, you know, you don't look like a drug addict. You don't look like you live in poverty. You don't look like, you know, all of these different labels that like a felon. You don't look like a felon, a criminal. What does that look like? What do those things look like? I would venture to guess that there's people in this room that have done things in their past that could be any of those things. Right? And they probably just didn't get caught. And so they wouldn't have the barriers that happen when you've been labeled with one of those things that make it so hard to move forward with your life. When you were talking, I was like, thank God that my kids are boys.
can I just say one thing on it?
We're going off script now.
When we approach people, one thing we were very passionate about, we did not use the word poverty. We called it the poverty puzzle because it is a puzzle that none of us can figure it out. And we hoped it was a title that would bring people from all sides in. But when we approached people, we told them everything, exactly what we were doing, and everything we knew up to that point. And if you're honest as a reporter, you have to say, I don't know where this is going to end up. But it's where you're going to end up. It's your story, you know. You own it, but you're letting us in. You're giving us an honor to share it because you have something to say. You know, you can give hope. You can make someone think about these issues in a different way, think of their neighbor in a different way. So when we talk to people, we said, we really, I met you for whatever reason, and we're writing a story about people who are struggling to make it in this economy, people that are having a hard time being mobile and getting out of a situation. We try never to put labels on them. And we try to talk to them more about the fact that we knew where they wanted to go. We wanted to honor them in how they saw themselves and who they saw themselves in the future being, yet understanding all the weight on them. And just also, we wanted to be compassionate here. You know, these people can't go to therapists, or, I mean, a lot of them, that's not even part of the culture or anything. And so we wanted to be a safe space. Some people decided they didn't want their stories to run thin. And some people were enormously brave, and we actually did read our stories word for word to every source. That was an intimate subject, because we were so honored they let us into their story. It was their story. We wouldn't let them edit it, like, you know, we didn't hold a copy of the paper, but we read it to them so they could hear it to make sure it was true. Everything was true to them because it was their story. So that was something that we did that really helped them feel comfortable, and they felt excited because they were the first to hear it. They didn't have to look at it in the paper, you know, because it was their story. They deserved to hear it first. So that's just something.
Yeah, there's a lot of powerful moments when you're covering people, you know, living rough lives, and when they do, and it's super humbling as a journalist when they open up to you and they literally tell you the worst moments of their lives. And then, you know, I always ask them, are you sure you want this out before the public? Like, and I'm gonna write a great deal. I don't write soft, mushy stuff very often. And when they say yes, it's a humongous responsibility that you feel to portray it as absolutely accurately and honestly as possible. And it's also super humbling because it's a huge responsibility, and it's also a wonderful thing to be able to do that and share those stories. You guys have beat me to a couple of questions already, so that's a good thing. Now we're going way off script. You know what, for a control freak like me, this is hard.
It's the two of journalism this time.
Yes.
Since we were, and I've got my bearings.
No, you're good. No worries.
So as we're talking about labels and stuff like that, and have you guys ever heard of Julian Adichie, The Danger of a Single Story? Anybody in the audience? Yeah. So labels are endangering of a single story, right? And so, so this, for those of you who haven't watched it, this woman talks about when she moved to America and was in a college. Her college roommate thought she like lived in a hut and was like your stereotypical person from Africa, right? And so that's kind of like what the stuff that we're talking about is. Like we picture poverty and we picture one image. You know, we picture homelessness, we see one image. And so that's what journalists can do, is help us see more than one story. And that's where, you know, we can get more people, if we can show that it's safe, and we can get more people to tell their story, you know, by you guys reporting responsibly, which I think that we have 3 great journalists here that do that, then we can get more stories, and it's not just that single image that we envision. One thing that when I started sharing my story that the reason why I did was when you Googled Sarah Ferber before, you got a mugshot and drug bust. That's what came up on Google, and I was like, okay, we're gonna fix that. And so I'm gonna start sharing my stories about other things. It's still, you know, you still see addiction and things like that, but it's positive. It's positive light. The other thing is you were talking about like a lot of the citizens in the red state and things like that. You know, we have a lot of conservative folks around this area too, and I think, you know, that journalists have the opportunity to bridge that gap. You know, I want to learn how to talk to people from the other side of the aisle. You know, being an advocate and being somebody that wants to get everyone on board and helping disadvantaged people. Help me, you know, teach me how to do that. I'm looking forward to reading your articles, and I think journalists have a very unique job and ability to help us figure out how to do that. You know, so yeah.
I'm going to skip ahead just a minute, Dominique, to get you back in this. So how can we counteract the media effects? People are attracted to certain kinds of stories that may contribute to stereotypes. So are the things we talked about already, is that the best way to counteract that?
Yeah, I think we have covered a lot of the main points, and I agree with Sarah that it seems like we have 3 great journalists in the room that do not fall into the fallacies of easy journalism, if you want. We need to keep in mind, I think journalists need to keep in mind how people process information. And there's something that we call motivated reasoning, that we have our ideas about something, and we use that as a filter to actually make sense of what we read. They say they have conservative views, this is going to be my filter to process the information in a way that fits my beliefs. So even a great story written by one of our wonderful journalists here could be interpreted very differently by two different people, depending where they come from. So what's the lesson here? Is for the journalists to realize that my story may be interpreted very differently, depending on who's reading this, depending where they come from. And I think you said something that was critical here. They said, I think you said, I imagine my parents reading those stories, knowing that my parents do not feel like me. But this story should be appealing and also resonate with people that do not feel like me. They coming from their reasoning that can be different, but as a journalist, my role is to serve all the readers, to serve my issue, to serve, like a good journalism, transparency, honesty, commitment, and concern should be actually conservative, liberals, anybody should be able to find something in the story that actually resonates with them, and that I think that's the key.
Thank you.
I was just gonna add, we did that on both sides of the aisle too, because we felt like one of the groups that gets alienated a lot of times, we don't realize the power that they have in the communities, the faith-based community. And so we really, that was one of our stories in our 7-part series, and so we focused on the churches in the Chattanooga community that really were passionate about helping people and really doing a good job in highlighting one of the colleges. It's a Presbyterian-based college on Lookout Mountain, Covenant College, and the work that they've been doing with data and just trying. They've actually written books to help churches, like give them guidance on how to do this in a purposeful, meaningful way. And that was really important to us too, to not exclude any part of the community. And so the response, that was really exciting to see the response on that too.
They arranged a big conference for all the churches to start fighting poverty. It was really cool.
Oh, you guys are eating.
You read your notes.
I can't read my notes most of the time. So I'm going to wrap it up with this. Can you two journalists tell me what was the impact? You guys did this humongous big series for 2 years, profiling all kinds of different people in all kinds of different situations, all kinds of statistics. Tell all these great personal stories. What happened because of it? You just started to tell us.
I'm starting to feel emotional talking about this. It's been a while, but we didn't know if anyone would read it. And then when it came out, it was like, I don't even know how to explain it, because it's hard to say because you feel like you're writing about yourself, but it wasn't our stories, it was the people. But people just, they loved it. I mean, it was so long, and I can't even count the emails, the calls. I got calls, it was everybody applied in a different way. One woman called, we decided we're going to be foster parents. There was a guy who called who said, I'm homeless and I'm living in my car, and I saw the article on the bottom of my floor of my car and I read it, and I decided not to kill myself. And then community foundation heads wanted us to speak to all their boards, and they all changed every single community foundation in our community has changed their major agenda items to economic mobility. The mayor made it his name. It was really just because people trusted us. That was the only reason.
It's a nice way to end it, and it's heartening for me to hear that. I had in different ways kind of a similar experience in response to this big homeless series that I did here that we were talking about earlier, and it continues today. And I'm beyond humbled by the fact people even read any of it, because you don't, like when you're a journalist, you don't know, especially if you take on a topic that maybe a lot of people have a preconceived notion about or whatnot. You don't know if anybody's going to read it. And I was all steeled for big attacks, like a lot of people saying, oh, that's a bunch of crap, why are you reporting on those people? They're not making money in our community, and all of that. I've heard that stuff through the years that the poverty reporting I had done. But there was a little of that, but there was hardly any of that. It was mostly people saying, oh, if few swear words mixed in, but holy crap, this is happening here in my community in the winter? People sleeping on the streets and living in cars and tents and in the woods. And secondly, a lot of them said, what can I do to help? And it was one of the most heartening things I've ever had happen. And the fact that some good stuff came out of it, and some of that continues today, makes you feel when you're down pace as a journalist, when you're way late on deadline, and your newsroom continues to get cut and shrunk, and you have all kinds of sectors all across this country, including the White House, calling us fake news, saying we're enemy of the people, and all this nonsense. Stuff like that is really great. Happenings like that will keep us going, I think. Thank you guys very much for listening, and now Jan is going to come up and give you some instructions.
Oh yeah.